morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Connection. We will begin today with our prayer of surrender. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it, I perceive it, and now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. So today's devotion is called Don't Choose Sides, Choose Love. And my brother wrote today's, as you will see when we get into the text, because I have not done any marital counseling, but he has. So he wrote today's, and let's begin though by saying our affirmation together. Today, I choose not to choose sides. Instead, I choose peace, and I choose the highest good for all who seek my help. So he starts with a story. He says, early on in my ministry, I learned a difficult lesson. During a marital counseling session, I encountered a spousal partner who had a long list of grievances against their partner. As I listened, I lost objectivity and neutrality. I chose sides. I was upset and wanted to follow up with the villainized partner. As we talked, I learned about the other side of the story. I heard details that equally upset me with the spouse who had initially come to me with accusations and complaints. As I stepped back and took a breath, I realized who I was really upset with, myself. I had allowed myself to choose sides. In my initial reactions, I lost sight of my purpose. I was there to create peace, to initiate change, to build a bridge, to instigate redemption. I apologized to the couple for my subjectivity and thanked them for a lesson that would journey with me for a lifetime. God has called us to repair the breaches between people, to fill the chasms dividing loved ones, to be a balm of healing. If we choose sides, we forfeit this purpose. When we remember our person, function will follow. Okay, so that was a great one. Has anybody ever heard this little statement or saying that there are always three sides to every argument? There's my side, there's your side, and then there's the truth, which is always somewhere in the middle. So as always, that when you continually seek to find the middle way, which we do here, then you truly want the highest good for everyone involved. And if you're doing that, then you cannot lose. So competition is set up with a win-lose. Somebody has to lose in order for somebody else to win. That's competition. But cooperation is when both people can win. And that takes another C word, compromise. So let's all remember to do that more and more, and remember to do it as often as we can. We will end with the prayer. Highest good, empower me to be a bridge over troubled waters, a voice of peace, a presence of redemption, and a spirit of restoration. Amen. All right, take a deep breath. And now we will say our connection affirmation. I allow perfect health in my body, perfect peace in my mind, perfect unconditional love in my heart, and the perfect divine timing of spirit to guide my life in thought, word, and deed. Amen. So before we begin, I just want to thank everyone again for, first of all, my brother for filling in for me last week. Last week was the day after my mother-in-law had passed. I was speaking with Miss Valerie this morning and Lard, telling them that it was very sudden. She was at church that morning, actually, celebrating her 94th birthday, which had happened a few days earlier. She was in good spirits. She went to lunch at our house and thanked my mother and kind of lingered longer than she normally would, which we thought was kind of strange because Granny was not the kind of person that wanted to sit around and chat. She was not a chatter. So when she did that, we just kind of let her be. And then that night, she just went. And I believe, as I was telling them this morning, that her higher self knew what the best way was, knew what was best for her, what was best for us, what needed to happen, and just took over, and it happened, and it was peaceful. And I want to thank everyone for your cards, for your hugs, for your text, for your phone calls. We have really felt your love. Her service will be this Saturday here at 11 a.m. if any of you would like to come, but we so appreciate your love at this time. So I have some quotes for you today, and unfortunately, I don't have the authors of any of them. As I've told you guys before, sometimes when I see a quote or hear a quote, I'll just write it down. Sometimes I get the author's name, sometimes I do not. I did not get any of the authors on these, but they are really good. So the first one is, feel the feeling, but don't become the emotion. Witness it, allow it, release it. Next, may I live like the lotus at ease in the muddy water. Did anyone know that lotuses do not grow in any kind of water except muddy water? All right, so that's interesting. All right, next, not all storms come to disrupt your life. Some come to clear your path. All right, this next one is good. The sky isn't more beautiful if you have perfect skin. Music doesn't sound more interesting if you have a six-pack, meaning abs, not beer. Dogs aren't better company if you're famous. Pizza tastes good regardless of your relationship status. Sometimes it's better when you're single. Okay. The best life exists beyond everything we are meant to feel bad about lacking. I'm going to repeat that last sentence. The best of life exists beyond everything we are meant to feel bad about lacking. All right, next one. I want to learn through softness and grace. I want to learn through joy and laughter. I release my desire to learn through pain and devastation. I choose ease. Or we could say it this way, I choose to learn with ease. And remember, years ago, I did a teaching called All My Lessons Come to Me Gently, which I really believe can happen if you intend for that to happen. Some people can just get tapped on the shoulder. Like when I was a little girl, all my daddy had to do was look at me, and I straightened up whatever I was doing. Now my brother, he had to have a little more persuasion, incentive. Yeah, that's a good word, Miss Bobby. But it doesn't take all that. If you can just listen to the little voice, which we're going to talk a little bit, which I talked about on Sunday, then you can learn all your lessons easily with a minimal amount of pain. So we're going to talk about that today. What's the best way to get to that place where you learn your lessons with ease? It is by choosing to say yes, and the power that doing so holds, as well as a little bit into the proper use of saying no. All right, so we're going to get more into that. Week before last, we began a conversation about saying yes and how we all want more yeses in our life, more yeses than nos. We talked about how no is a door closing energy, but yes is a door opening energy. We also learned that from the standpoint of writing, a character can't be put into motion, and therefore a story can't be advanced or moved forward into forward direction without a yes until that character says yes. No keeps the status quo in place. No signals resistance. No contracts, whereas yes expands. So no is an ending, yes is a beginning. So it's a conversation ender. Did anybody watch the movie? I think it was the very first one that Ben Stiller did, Meet the Parents. Do you remember that? And remember when he was on the airplane and he didn't want to check his bag again because they had lost it the first time with the engagement ring in it, and the flight attendant was kind of trying to fight with him, and he said, "I'm done with the conversation about the baggage." So no is a conversation ender. So we're going to do part 2 today on this topic that I am calling the power of yes. Nobody really likes change because change is uncomfortable. But we will change when the pain of remaining the same becomes greater than the pain of changing. And sometimes change begins necessarily with a no. We don't like change, but we also don't like pain. So when we're in a painful situation, it's our desire to get out of it. When pain becomes great enough, we will allow change because we are saying, no, we don't like this feeling. No to the pain. But in a way, if you look at it like that, no is just a starting point, okay? It's not an ending unless we stop after we say it. Okay, when you say no and just stop, then that ends things. But if you use that no as a beginning to something else, then it doesn't have to be. No by itself, as I just said, no by itself is a conversation ender. And that's why we have to acknowledge the no, but then keep moving until we get to a yes, because nothing is going to move forward until we get to that yes. Esther Hicks talks about something that she refers to as rockets of desire. Some of you may have heard her talk about this before. She's always saying that we're constantly launching these rockets of desire. And these rockets of desire, which is just another way of saying the things that we want, come from what she calls contrast, or encountering things in our life that we don't want. So we learn what we want by understanding what it is that we don't want. So remember, week before last, we talked about children learning the concept of no before they learn the concept of yes, because no is a root response. It has to do with survival and self-protection and boundaries, which we're also going to talk about a little bit later. Boundaries are necessary, but there is an appropriate and an inappropriate way to set them. So the concept of yes is a higher vibration than no. You have to feel safe. In other words, your boundaries have to be in place before you can say yes. Okay, so does everybody understand that? It's like yes, you can say yes, but if you're not in a safe place when you say yes, that's not a good thing. So that no, the boundaries have to be in place first, and you have to be in a safe place from which to say yes. There's a lady who lives out on the West Coast in California who follows our ministry, and she considers herself a part of us even though she's never been here in person. And her name is Cheryl Cady. And she sent me an article that I want to begin with today. So I want to thank Cheryl if she's watching. And this is the article addresses the fact that no is necessary sometimes on a very foundational level, but we can't stop with no. We have to use it as a starting place only to identify those things that are for us, those rockets of desire. And once launched by our initial no, I'm not good with the way things are right now, then they can only come to fruition by, after that, saying yes to more. Something else Esther Hicks talks about is being content with or accepting what is, while at the same time being eager for more. So let's get started, okay? The name of the article I'm going to read from first is The Yes and Improv Rule for Life. And I think I have read this. I think I've read part of this in an earlier teaching. But has anybody ever heard of that? Taken any acting classes? Okay, if you've ever taken an acting class, they'll tell you when you're doing improvisation, it's the yes and rule. And this is by a man named Clay Drinko. What if your last name was Drinko? Okay. So what that's referring to is a specific method that actors use when they're doing improvisational theater, which is usually comedy. And just in case you've never heard of it, it's a form of theater in which all or most of what is performed is unplanned. It's unscripted. It's created spontaneously on the spot by the actors. So sounds a lot like life to me. We improvise our way through life every day. Even the most diligent list maker and planner doesn't really know exactly how his or her day is going to go, because you can only plan for yourself. You have no way of knowing what others are going to say or do, or how they will respond or react to what you do. So life is basically just a big improv theater. So Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage and we are merely players. And then if you are rock music fans and you have ever heard of the band Rush, they expanded on that quote in one of their songs. Says, each performers and portrayers, each another's audience outside the gilded cage. That is in a song called Limelight, which is one of my favorite songs. So in improv, there's something called the yes and rule, which is built on the premise that improvised scenes go better when the improvisers say yes to each other's ideas, then add new information to the scene. So on to the article, which says this. Let's start with an example. Let's say one improviser walks on stage and says that their hair is on fire. Their teammate should join them on stage and agree with that reality. The reality that improviser number one's hair is indeed on fire. That's the yes part of the yes and improv rule. But we can't stop there, okay? Improviser number two needs to then add some new information to the scene. She could roast a marshmallow on the head fire, or say that her hair is also on fire, or tell her teammate she's a firefighter. The and part of the yes and is just new information that keeps the scene moving forward. Okay, time out. Just like we talked about in part one, a character, whether in a story that's written or on a stage where the action is being improvised, has to say yes in order to move the story forward. It makes sense that the yes and would work in improvised scenes when we take a look at what would happen if it wasn't used. So let's go back to our example. Let's say improviser number one takes the stage and says his hair is on fire. Then improviser number two joins him and says, no, your hair is not on fire. What happens now? There's nowhere to go. As we said earlier, no is a door closing and a conversation ending statement. Improviser number one could say, yes, it is, you're wrong. But then we just have a literal he said, she said scene. There is no forward movement. All we have is two people arguing with few other options to keep the scene going. Now, this is me talking now. That was the article. Think about that in real life. That's also true. In an argument where each person is dug in on their side, there is literally nowhere else to go with the conversation until someone gives in a little and says yes to something. And that's the compromise we were talking about in the devotion today. So then the article goes into some real life scenarios where this rule can be helpful. The first one is in the workplace. The yes and rule is great for ideating and creating. I always give the example of a corporate brainstorming session. Someone spitballs or generally offers a random idea and it gets shot down immediately. This is where the yes and rule would come in handy. If the yes and rule had been used, they wouldn't have shot down the seemingly dumb idea. They would have just gone with it. Maybe they would have tried to make it better or added to it. This would have allowed everyone in the room to stay creative and engaged, whereas shutting down ideas tends to shut people down. Okay, so time out. This is true. When I was in the 8th grade, I was taking pre-algebra. And I was, in public high school back then, I don't know if they still do this, but they put you like on these tracks. Like there's level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 3 is advanced. Number 2 is kind of in the middle. And number 1 is if you need some help. So apparently we took these little entrance exams and I needed a little bit of help in math. I've never been a math person, so I got put on level 1 in the 8th grade. Well, I did really well. They probably should have put me in level 2 because I did so well that the next year in the 9th grade, they shot me all the way up to level 3 in Algebra 1. And I was so behind because I had not been in the advanced class the year before. And I had a teacher who was an older woman, and she's just an old bitter woman. Let's just be honest. She's an old bitter woman. She favored boys. All her favorite students were boys. She did not like the girls, and I'm going to sound like my mom here. She especially didn't like pretty girls. So she did not like me. And the first couple of times I raised my hand to ask a question because I didn't understand something, she just shut me down. Well, guess what? I didn't ask any more questions because I was too embarrassed. So that back then we had the quarter system, not semesters. So we had 3 quarters. Quarter 1, I made a D. I'd never made a D before in my life. Quarter 2, I made a D. Quarter 3, I made an F. And I ended up having to retake it the next year because I got shut down and I was too embarrassed to keep asking questions. So that's a great example of why you shouldn't shut people down, even if you think what they're saying is dumb. Rest in peace, Mrs. Simmons. Okay. I haven't heard, but I'm sure she's gone by now because she was 105 when I was in the 8th grade. So back to the article. Oh, and what made it worse was the guy I was dating was her favorite student, and she just loved him, and she hated me. He was the star student our senior year, and he picked her to be his favorite teacher, and I was so mad at him. Anyway, okay. Back to the article. The next real-life scenario is how the yes and rule can be used at home. The yes and rule can help couples move beyond conflict and listen better to each other. If I'm using this rule, I'm likely to drop my defensiveness and try to see the truth in what my partner is saying instead of just shutting down and arguing. It can also be used to more positively parent. Whenever possible, I try to use the yes and rule with my daughter. It helps me to see things from her perspective. When she says she's scared, I don't negate her by telling her what she's afraid of isn't actually scary, or that she shouldn't be scared, or worse, that she's not scared. Also, when she wants to help with the dishes, I accommodate when I can and let her practice that skill, even though I know it will be inefficient and messy. So I love that. I was not a perfect parent when my boys were growing up, and there were many times I told them that they shouldn't be afraid when they were obviously afraid. Looking back now, that is the dumbest, most dismissive thing in the world to tell a child or anyone else. Either that they're not afraid or that they shouldn't be afraid. Justified or not, they are afraid. That is what they are feeling. And you telling them they're not isn't helping. It's only teaching them that their feelings don't matter and causes them to question their own gut. Okay, like I was talking about on Sunday, that causes them to question their own inner voice. When they're feeling something, they know they're feeling it, and their authority figure is saying, no, you don't. All right. It's much better to meet them where they are in their fear, which this article will also talk about in a minute, and then try to lead them out of it with reason and logic, or by your example, showing them that you're not afraid of whatever it is, okay? Whatever it is that works. Next scenario, on the therapist's couch. Here it is. Therapists can also use the yes and rule to improve their relationship with their clients. It's the classic meet them where they are idea. Yes and allows therapists to go along with their clients' realities instead of becoming prescriptive or just trying to jump in and fix the problem for them by telling them what to do or how to think differently about the issue. This doesn't mean they have to agree with everything their clients say, but it does mean they honor that that's where their client's head is in that particular moment. So we see the value of saying yes and instead of no in a variety of different settings and situations. Now the author gives us the other side of the coin for a minute. He says all these applications for the yes and rule are well and good. But it's definitely not as simple as just saying yes to everything. Okay, so if you've been sitting back saying it can't be as simple as that, here you go. For the yes and rule to work in real life, we have to be aware of our personal boundaries. Let's look at a few examples to make it clear why boundaries are important when using yes and. We don't have to yes and anything that's racist or sexist or dangerous, or that makes us uncomfortable because it goes against our personal values or morals. No means no, and it is a powerful tool to shut down things that need to be shut down. So, like we said before, no shuts things down, and there are things that need to be shut down. Certainly, all the things he's already listed. It's always your right to say no to anything that is abusive on any level. But other than that, yes and is a good rule to follow in life as well as on the improv stage. He ends the article by talking about how using the yes and rule in his own life has helped him, because when he does, he doesn't begin with preconceived ideas and assumptions. Instead, he listens first and says yes whenever possible. I'm going to stop here. Remember a couple weeks ago we were talking about kids that get said yes to more often end up being more successful? That was that kind of is a good tie-in. Seeing if there is a way to add to the other person's idea rather than having competing conversation agendas. All right, so the closing thought of his is this: it's not as simple as being agreeable all the time. Boundaries protect us and help us maintain our values. But when we're in a safe environment, meaning there's no abuse going on, there's no danger involved, just two opposing opinions or viewpoints, when you're in that environment, yes and can be a powerful tool to help us put down our defensive walls and collaborate better with our loved ones, acquaintances, and colleagues. Okay, so that is the yes and rule, which, as he pointed out, is very helpful in most real life situations, if and when certain boundaries are in place. So since he mentioned that, let's talk about boundaries now and the appropriate way to approach them. This is also some information that I've shared with you before from Dr. Kim DeRamo, who says in her talk entitled How to Honor Yourself Without Creating Boundaries, it's called feel into the difference between these two approaches. Approach number one: I honor myself in the equation of my life, and I invite all people in my life to also honor me fully. Okay, so that's approach number one. Versus, I got to set up some boundaries because I don't like the way I'm being treated. I'm going to lay down the law and let everybody in my life know what I need and what I expect from them. Okay, so can you feel that those are coming from two completely different energies? When you honor yourself, you automatically invite others to do the same. When you set boundaries in the form of demands, all you do is wall yourself off from everybody else. Because, when somebody starts talking like that around me, my first is like, okay, you then be by yourself then. You don't ask me for help if that's the way I won't be checking on you anymore. All right. So again, let's remember, this is excluding abusive behavior. This is just about what you want and how you would prefer to be treated. When you feel as if you're not getting what you want or need from a particular relationship, it's usually never about a lack of boundaries, but rather an indication that you are not fully honoring or showing up for yourself. Every relationship is just a mirror that helps you see yourself more clearly. The energy of demand invites conflict, whereas the energy of complete and unconditional love and acceptance of yourself invites and creates love and acceptance from others. Another way to say that, based on what we're talking about today, is when you say no, other than in abusive situations, you're inviting conflict. You're shutting down creativity and any possibility for a solution. When you say yes to yourself, which translates into honoring, accepting, loving, and showing up for yourself, you're inviting others to do the same. You're moving the story of your life forward. Now, let's go back for a moment to the concept of being content or accepting your life, a situation, etc., as it is, but still being eager for more. Saying yes to the present moment and accepting it as it is does not mean you're just fine with whatever, and you have the attitude of just taking whatever comes. There is a big difference between acceptance with underlying desire and eagerness for more and better, and resignation, giving up. Those are also two different energies. We're going to continue now with Dr. Kim, but from a different talk of hers. This one is called How Acceptance Invites in More. Or again, in terms of our topic today, how saying yes instead of no, of fighting what is and being in resistance to it, invites in more and is more effective. And because her background is as a medical doctor, she's relating much of what she says here to physical illness and disease. But the principle she's discussing holds true across the board for any situation in life you find yourself in that you don't want to be in. She says, when you're sick and you're trying to improve your health, there's a lot of focus on fighting the disease. There's a lot of focus on the symptoms. There's a lot of focus on trying to reverse what's going on, and there's so much attention on the problem. But from a mind-body medicine perspective, which is what she calls her teachings about health, we realize that what that's actually going to create is just more of the problem, more imbalance in the body, more disharmony, and a general shutdown. Because again, remember we said no is a shutdown energy. So when you're always saying, no, I can't have this illness. No, I can't have this symptom. That's shutting your body down and not allowing it to do what it's supposed to do to heal itself. On the other hand, acceptance is a major key in transmutation. It allows massive and unthinkable change to happen, especially in the body. Acceptance, however, is not resignation. People say to me sometimes, well, if I just accept this condition, I'm never going to get any better. If I stop fighting this, then nothing will change. It's just going to snowball and become worse. And that's the big lie that keeps so many people in resistance and engaging in the fight and in the struggle, which only serves to amplify the problem. Our state of being and point of focus is what's creating everything in our lives, especially in our physical body. When we're in a fight with a disease, there's fear as well as vehement resistance. There's the feeling of, I'm not going to let this cancer win, or I'm not going to give in to this chronic fatigue. And this attitude only makes things worse. When you're in this state, we can actually see from brain scans that have been done that there is an inability to receive new awareness, new insight, and new solutions. It completely disrupts the harmonious chemistry of healing and your body's natural resilience. We are primarily vibrational beings, not physical. So we must begin to understand how this works at a vibrational level. When we're in a fight against disease, or if we're in a fight against another person or with any circumstance in our life that we don't want, fighting and resistance, or for our purposes today, saying no instead of yes, is only serving to create more of whatever it is we don't want. From a metaphysical standpoint, it's even more fascinating because when you're in resistance, everything you do, everything you say, everything you perceive as happening to you is seen through that filter, and nothing ever changes because your resistance is holding it in place. Okay, remember we've talked before about the tug of war? When you're resisting something, what are you doing? You're holding that other side right where it is. If you let go, what does it do? It falls. Okay. Your life is a direct reflection of your frequency, and in order to be on as high a frequency as you can be, you've got to release resistance and accept what is, which does not mean you cannot at the same time invite in more. So back to our earlier article, yes and. But you have to say yes first before you can get to more. Be content or at peace with what is, but be eager for more and better. So these two things can totally coexist. Those two truths can be true at the same time. Back to Dr. Kim. Accepting what is or saying yes to what is does not mean giving up on your dreams and resigning yourself to forever having this thing in your life that's unwanted. It's exactly the opposite. When we let go of trying to figure it out or fighting and become willing to just have the experience, we always access greater wisdom. The bottom line is you can't really fight or eradicate disease. All you can do is embrace health, well-being, and wholeness. Okay, so what did she just say there with that statement? The no, being in resistance, fighting, demanding that your boundaries be respected, doesn't work. The yes of believing perfect health, perfect peace, a harmonious life exists and is available to you at all times is the only thing that will get you there. It's the yes that gets you there, not the no. Letting go of resistance doesn't mean you're not going to be able to take care of a physical issue. It doesn't mean it's going to be less likely that you're going to do what needs to be done, or to rearrange your finances, or to find the love of your life, or to take responsibility for any number of things that are going on. When you're in ease and not in resistance, you're going to be more likely, not less, to take inspired action. You will be more, not less likely to know what really needs to be done. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it now, but there's a difference between just action and inspired action. Remember when you were in school and the teacher didn't feel well or whatever, and she would give you busy work at your desk? Okay, so action with no inspiration is just busy work. It's not really getting a whole bunch done. You have to be inspired for something to really be effective. The only thing that will create more expansion in your health, in your relationships, in your career is to first create an energetic shift by opening up rather than shutting down. So again, a yes rather than a no. This type of shift takes place when you say, it's okay as it is, and I'm aware that life, God, the universe, is on my side. It's okay as it is, and I'm aware that there's more for me that is available. Yes, it's okay as it is, and there's more. All right, so we're seeing here the connection, how yes and is really the same as acceptance of what is, but eager for inviting in more. Acceptance, saying yes to the now, is how we get to the more and to the better. So the last point she makes in this particular talk is about vulnerability, and I'm going to read a little of what she says about it, and then we're going to sum it all up with how vulnerability, which most people view as weakness, is actually our greatest strength. Dr. Kim says the biggest thing that happens with acceptance is that it brings up vulnerability in you. And when you are vulnerable, you are actually invincible. Let me repeat that. When you are vulnerable, you are actually invincible. So that sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? How can that be true? Well, I just so happen to have some notes from a teaching I did back in 2018, way back there, called The Paradox of Vulnerability, which I'm going to represent to you anew right now. But before I do, I want to give you one more quote from Dr. Kim. She says, acceptance is saying, I am willing to have this experience, period. It's not resignation. Instead, it's vulnerability, which is the awareness that you are actually an infinite being having a physical experience, and the willingness to be vulnerable in your human experience anchors you into the space of allowing and inviting the more in. So here we go with the paradox of vulnerability. We talk a lot about life being a paradox and how we should always be searching to find balance and the middle way, and how truth is held in the tension of opposites. And that is true. But as is the case with most things in life, where there is the real, there is also the counterfeit. There are always two sides to a coin. Negative energy cannot be destroyed. No energy once created can be destroyed. It can only be transformed into the positive. Because we live in a world of duality, there is always a negative to every positive. The positive side of the paradox of life includes things like the upside down kingdom, how true leaders and rulers are actually the greatest servants, and how, just like Jesus did, by laying down your life, by killing your ego, you actually gain life. The more you give, the more comes back to you. So that's the positive side of the paradox. But right now we're going to talk about the flip side of that, and how one of the negative paradoxes in life is our inability and unwillingness to be vulnerable and appear weak is actually what makes us weak. In Western culture, American culture specifically, the way most of us are taught to deal with feeling vulnerable is either to outrun it, outwork it, or out-achieve it. Anything but admit it. Okay, so like Dr. Kim was just talking about, we fight it. We resist feeling vulnerable. The foundation of that is the Western concept. It's more prevalent in the West than in others, that needing to ask for help is a sign of weakness and something that we should be ashamed of. We're programmed very early in life by being rewarded for the things we can do by ourselves. And while that is indeed an important part of our human growth and development, it must also be balanced with the concept that asking for help when you need it is not and should not be shameful. So let's back up a little now and talk about the relationship between vulnerability and courage and bravery. Vulnerability is defined as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. In battle or a fight, it would also mean physical exposure or leaving yourself open to be hurt or killed. The question we have to ask is, can we name one act of courage or bravery that we've ever been involved in or witnessed anyone else be involved in that didn't require these very things? Uncertainty, risk, and emotional or physical exposure. If you think you're being brave and it doesn't involve these three things, you're not being brave. If you know going in what the outcome is going to be, it doesn't require courage. So that's the problem. We all want to be brave and courageous, or thought of as such, but we don't want to be vulnerable. And that's impossible. Our culture is one that says we highly value bravery and courage, yet we devalue most of the things that go along with that, or we equate those things with weakness. So therein lies the great dilemma of our time. No one wants to be vulnerable because it's uncomfortable, but everyone wants to be brave. And it just doesn't work like that. No one teaches us how to properly deal with our pain and discomfort, because we are also a culture that seeks comfort a great deal. And we associate being uncomfortable with failure, okay? If you're uncomfortable somehow, you think you failed. Have you ever heard somebody talk about they make a comfortable living, and if they don't, something's wrong? Okay. In our culture, it is shameful to be vulnerable or weak, and we always want to be viewed as strong, especially men. But the catch is, men are taught incorrectly how to be strong and what it really means to be courageous. Men, really all of us, usually do one of two things in the face of being shamed by someone else or themselves. They get angry or they shut down. They put on a mask. I'm not scared. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm fine. The great poet James Baldwin said, "Now I know why people hold on to their hate so stubbornly, because once they let it go, there's nothing left but pain." One of the cheapest and least courageous ways to lead, whether it's a country you're leading or a family or a religion, is to give people someone else to hate and blame for their own misery, especially when they are feeling vulnerable, uncertain, and fearful. In our culture, we largely cope with our pain by ignoring it, by saying, nope, it's not there, by not accepting we're even in pain. But pain is not something that will just go away if ignored, okay? And that's often what we do, what we're told. We're taught to play hurt. We're taught to shake it off and go on. Many times, especially men, will transform their emotional pain into physical pain, because then they can deal with it. When men feel emotional pain, they want to inflict physical pain either on themselves or on others, okay? This is stereotyping, but this is what the information was saying. So men most often want to hurt others, unfortunately. Women most often want to hurt themselves. If you know about this phenomenon, especially among like middle school aged girls, that they cut themselves, what that's doing is it's bringing the pain up to a level where they can physically feel it so they can deal with it. But what then? Do we deal with it, or do we just numb it? All right. So what's the answer? We must own our own pain and somehow learn to transform it into something we can use positively. Or as Dr. Kim said, be willing to have the experience, period. But we also live in a culture that believes there are not very many good reasons to be in pain. Western medicine says, here, take this pill. A recent study I read talks about how even taking medicine to reduce your fever sometimes only prolongs your recovery because your fever serves a purpose. Fever burns away infection and virus, but we take a Tylenol because we don't want to feel miserable. We don't want to be in pain. But the price for that is that may be weakening the very tool that nature is providing to help us get better. Our society today is the most medicated, most addicted, most obese, most in debt it has ever been, largely because we have adopted a policy of zero tolerance for pain and discomfort. And the paradox of that is trying to appear strong and okay all the time is what has made what some would refer to as soft. That's what's made us soft or weak. Because instead of doing the inner work it takes to transform our pain into something positive, which requires feeling it, saying yes to it. We would rather just take a pill or have a drink or buy something online to make us feel better, which enables us to continue wearing the mask of strength, but that's not true strength. That is counterfeit strength. So, there's a famous quote that says, "It's not our." Wait a minute, I'm not going there. That was something from earlier. So we put on this mask of strength. We think we're projecting strength, but what we're really doing is just making ourselves weaker. In reality, pretending you're not vulnerable is what makes you the most vulnerable, and that is the negative paradox of life. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is about being willing to show up and be seen even when you don't know the outcome and you know that you can't control the outcome. That is actually the greatest measure of courage. So how do we do this? As we said earlier, once created, energy, even negative energy, can never be destroyed. We can never get rid of shame, okay? So that's been conditioned into us, feeling weak because we're vulnerable, equating those two things. So we have to develop resilience to it. We have to learn how to properly cope with it. So the first key to transforming the negative energy that is created when we feel ashamed of being vulnerable is to own it. If you own your story, your pain, your shame, then you get to write the ending. If you don't own it, it owns you, and you allow others to write the ending of your story. I like to think about the scripture that says, "In our weakness, he is made strong." But in the past, we have thought of that as God being separate from us, some outside force coming to rescue us or save us. But actually, it's the Christ in us. It's only when we admit our weakness and our vulnerability that we can move that ego energy out of the way and make room for the divine part that's in us, that Christ in us, to stand up and be seen, to become our strength when we have none. By not admitting our weakness, we are only pretending to be strong. Our ego, trying to always stand in our own strength with no help from God or anyone else, is just a mask we wear. So let's take off the mask today and allow the Christ in us to truly make us strong. So that's how the teaching from 2018 that I gave ended. And I think that it gives a little more meaning to Dr. Kim's statement that when we are vulnerable, when we say yes to just having the experience of being vulnerable, we're actually invincible. Because it's when we own our vulnerability, we say yes to and fully accept the experience of being human and all that comes with it, that we open ourselves up to the more. That's when we can shift into something better. And what is the more? The discovery of the Christ inside of us, who is able to handle any situation that arises in our lives. I can do all things through Christ, the Christ inside me, who strengthens me. Amen? Amen. Okay, stand with me, please, and we're going to sing our ending song. Miss Diane is back. You're going to help me sing this song. You got a microphone, Miss Diane? Please remember tonight at 9:30, the broadcast, Bishop Pearson's broadcast with my brother tomorrow night, 7:30 rather than 6:30, 7:30 study series, Inclusion 101, Friday morning, 7 a.m. devotion, and next Sunday, we'll see you at church.
Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say amen.
Be at peace. I love you. We'll see you.